Today I have a tutorial to explain how to get up and running in the application called Figma. And I'm going to use as an example how to build wireframes in Figma. I have a project that I've already started. I have some just paper wireframes that I sketched out. And what I did is I kind of thought through the topic of it's for an app, a menu ordering app. And so I thought through the way the app would progress through the screens for the user. And I sketched out several wireframes for each screen. And then I narrowed it down based on the features that I thought I would want to have in my app. And then I pulled those into Figma as a reference. And then I started drawing out my app screens in Figma. So I'm going to kind of backtrack here to show you how I did this. So for example, you can just drag your paper wireframes directly into Figma. So I saved them as JPEG and I just dropped them in. And then I lined them up and organized them. You can move them around. The typical size I'm going with, my frame size is Android large, which is 360 by 800 pixels. And I'm going to delete these for now. But just to give you an overview, this basically plane is 6,500 pixels wide and long. And so the way the application is set up is you place your frame, which is kind of a pasteboard, would be thought of as a pasteboard in Photoshop or Illustrator, to frame up your art. So I just go here to my frame tool, frame, and I select whatever frame I want to use. They have some preset phone, tablet, desktop, etc. frames, and I'm just working with Android large just to give me some room to manipulate my objects. But if you're somewhat familiar with Adobe Illustrator or Photoshop, then you should be able to get up and running fairly quickly in the Figma platform because a lot of the key commands are similar. Some of the panels are similar. The concept is similar. Sometimes they use different terms. For example, like I just mentioned, frame versus pasteboard, or artboard. It's called artboard in Illustrator and Photoshop. But even if you're not like a seasoned user of Adobe applications or something comparable like Adobe XD, you can still get up and running because the platform is pretty user-friendly and the tools are really clear. And the other advantage that Figma has is that you're able to collaborate with other designers, and in real time you're able to see their comments and things. But what I have here is I'm working in their free starter plan, and you can accomplish a lot, but a lot of the more advanced collaboration tools are not available in this plan. But I wanted to give you an idea of what's possible in the starter plan. You can actually accomplish a lot. So I have my screens laid out in order of how I want the user experience to flow, and I have a few starter screens. And actually what I've done is I'm laying out my home page. I'll just zoom in and show you a little bit better. Oops. Okay, I'm going to zoom to 100 so I can show you how I'm working here. I'm just calling it my sandwich for demonstration purposes, and I'm using some Greek text, lorem ipsum, here and there just for non-essential copy. And then I'm laying out my images as boxes, grayed out boxes, my buttons just as basic shapes, my profile icon in the corner, sandwich, hamburger menus as lines. And then when I come up with even as I'm thinking through this project, I'm coming up with some alternate layouts that I'm drawing out, and then I'm going to just whittle it down later as I had progressed through the project. So I have my first and second screens laid out. I don't know if you can see this, but it's I decided to rethink my menu as just kind of a more cleaner interface and some of my menu options. And then this was my original menu screen, which was just going to be kind of a specials carousel and then scrolling down to the options. My thought is just to have kind of a niche sandwich shop that just has just beverages, sandwiches, etc. Or my alternate thought on this was to just go have the user go click through sandwiches, and then they can get the sandwiches menu and that way, and then just proceed that way through the app. So let me show you how I would start to sketch out my third screen, which is the option screen for the sandwich. So once the person selected their sandwich here, I thought that they would, or on the carousel, I was going to take them to sandwich options screen. So I'm going to go back to my frame tool. They also have some shortcuts that you'll get familiar with as you go. And then I'm just picking Android large and I'm just moving it into place. And then it creates a layer for this frame. It's very similar to Illustrator. So I'm just going to go click on it, control click to rename this layer. And then I'm just trying to name them all consistently so that as this project grows, it won't be too confusing. And I'm going to just call this options. And then I just draw simple shapes and I reuse certain elements. And I created a component out of these elements. So I'm going to show you how I would create a component, which is handy because if you want to reuse this across your application, these projects tend to grow exponentially. So if you reuse a component throughout your entire project, and then you decide you want to change one element, you're not going through and changing the element on every screen. You could just change it once as a component, and then it'll cascade through and change everything. So I'm going to show you how I would create a component. You can really get the feel for this after just a little time spent in this application. That's what I like about it. So I'm basically just recreating this header, and I'm going to turn it into a component. So I'm going to minus the fill on it, and I'm going to add a 1-point stroke. And I want it to be 360 by 80. And I'm just going to adjust that here in the design panel. And I'm not constraining my proportions, so I can freehand alter this. Then I'm going to create a line. Here are your shapes. The idea of a wireframe is just to create a polished sketch from your thoughts that you can add to later, you can build out later. Very useful in app development. So, and I'm using a key command, an Illustrator key command I just used there. So I'm holding the Option Shift and then Command D. And you can refine it as you go. I'm just going to group these. No, I'm not going to group it. I don't like the spacing on that. Okay, I'm just going to group this, and I'm going to rename it as my menu. I'm going to do a logo here. the type tool. Everything is here at the top. All your main tools are here at the top. All your layers are on the side and your assets. It's laid out really well. I'm going to make this larger. And all your element tools are over here to make changes. And make this 24. Here's my header logo. I like the snapping. Lines up with other elements. I'm gonna just add a profile. I'm just gonna zoom in. I'm gonna make this slightly different to show you some of the freehand tools that are available. Make that black. I'm just going to put a smiley face in here. Oh, you have to hit enter. Forgot, you have to hit enter to say done when you're using you're using the path tool. I'm just going to group this, and I'm going to call this my profile. Command R on Mac will help you change the name. That's my profile icon. And then I'm going to group this, and I'm going to call it my header, for example. And now the way you create a component, I like to copy it just for reference. I don't know why. It just makes me feel better about creating a component, even though you can turn it back into a frame. So here, component, so it's a header now. So if I were to duplicate this as a component onto another frame, and then I want to make changes, for example, so let's say I wanted to make this not so happy. See? So that's my original art here. This is my original art turned into a component which I modified. So that's the difference between having a component and just using regular art that you would have to modify several times over your project. So now I'm going to zoom back out, and I'm going to start with I actually like the smile better than what I have, but I can always change it because it's a component. So I'll start with my third screen, and this is my reference. I'm going to move this down here. I'm going to start with copy my component header, and then I'm going to reuse some of my other components here. Well, some of my other art pieces for now. I want to do a cascading box image. I'm just holding down the Option key while I drag, or the Shift key to constrain it horizontally or vertically. And then that's my my cascading window, and I want to just give the illusion of some options here for now. And I'm going to use a star instead of a heart. And so you can add to that particular sandwich option to favorites. Remove the fill and add a stroke. 30 by 30. And now I'm going to do some options. Since I already built some of these things, I'm just reusing parts of it that are not components, just to use it as a starter tool to build the art. I'm gonna do a square. And just hit the T key when you're on the type and it'll select the whole thing. Size. And then just hit enter when you're done. And then I'm gonna add I like how they have all the different shapes that you would typically use handy. That's kind of nice. I'm gonna make this larger. Flush left. This is so nice how quick it is to just turn it from a fill to a stroke. And then I think I might bump this up to 2. And maybe this one too. And then I'm gonna see how this looks. Just holding down the Option key on Mac while I drag will make a duplicate. I can group these two. I probably should group them before I do that, because you could see how quickly your layers can become kind of a mess. So this is my options panel. This right here, I'm going to group. I'm just going to call it Command R Option 1. Okay, that's my star. I'm going to call this favorite. And then this group I'm going to call actually, you know what? That's not right. Actually, I'm not going to have I'm just going to call this sandwich. Because this is the sandwich that I selected. I'm going to actually make that a favorite. I'm going to add a fill. I'm going to say that I selected that already as a favorite. I think this polygon is going to look better as a fill too. Fill. This is my option 1 grouping. This is my my sandwich grouping. Top navigate. You can see how the components are purple, so you can distinguish. I'm going to drag my bottom menu navigation just to go back to home, menu, order, details. I'll flesh some of the details out on this later, but I just want to give you a brief overview. So this is my option 2 side. If you want a side to your sandwich, I'm just going to put side and have that be like a drop down. And I'm going to call this option 2. No, I'm not going to call it that. I'm going to call it side option. And this is going to be option size, option quantity. And then just going to rename this side, and this one and now that I think of it, I think these triangles are a little big. I'm going to remove the stroke, and I'm going to make it 15. And you can just nudge it too using the arrow keys. It's real easy to make changes. Okay, so those are all 18 pixels. And then I'm going to do my customize drop down. I'm just going to use this. Oops, that one's misnamed. And then, oops, that reminds me of something I want to mention on these components, is that I should probably, when the frame is resized, you want this component to resize with the frame, especially the top and bottom header. So on the bottom one, you want to constrain based on the right and left and the bottom, and this one right and left, top. So, and then that change is reflected everywhere. So back to my customize button. And then my rectangle. And this will give you options. I want to do an about section. I'm just, if the type is short enough, I've just been typing it out like I do here. I'm just going to say about this sandwich. And then I am going to Greek in, I'm going to say, I can just type in, I thought I had that in a text, in a note field, lorem ipsum, but you can always look it up. Lorem ipsum. And I'm going to make another text box. Make this not so light. There needs to be a certain amount of contrast between the type and the background. So I'm going to increase this. And I'm going to change this font. Okay, no Helvetica. To something sans serif. I'll just use that for now. I'm going to make this much smaller. You can adjust the line spacing too. Line height. I guess it's fine. So I'm good with that for now. I need room for my button. And I'm going to add a button here. Add to order. I'm going to make that all caps. And I'm going to make it larger. Center it. And I'm going to change my rectangles to 1 point. I don't think that looks right. I think it's too thick. And you can just select that layer, that specific layer, to make adjustments to. Customize size. So that's my second screen, my option screen. And then I'm going to move this one back. And then I'm going to work on my final order confirmation. This is just my first pass, so I'm probably going to make additional changes, but this will give you an idea of how you can use Figma to lay out your wireframes. Move this. Just click and drag. It's just so user-friendly. And actually, and another thing I practice I use is that when I either Greek the type as I did here, or I'll type out short lines, descriptive lines where needed, and for buttons, things like that. And I definitely do it on components just because it's easy to make changes. But for example, here, another way I would Greek the type is just by using thick lines. So I'm going to pick this up. This seems really similar to this screen, so I'm just going to pick this up, duplicate it, and drag it. And rename it. I'm going to call this confirm. This is my order confirm screen. And when I build my wireframes, I usually just do the main sections first and then fill in gaps later. So my final order confirm, and I'm deviating slightly from this just because I'm going to put a lot of my options under my hamburger menu rather than having all this here, search and all that in the header. I just didn't think it gave it a very clean look. So I'm going to remove this. I'm going to remove this, and I'm going to pick this up. I'm going to call this but once you get some basic elements built, you can just keep reusing them across your project. And this actually would have been good as a component, and I can still do that. When I see the need to build a component, I can always just build it at that time and then reuse it. But I'm not too far along in my project, so I'm not going to do that yet. I just want to show that there's several items in the cart. And see, I should have named these groups because it just gets confusing later. I'm going to call this item 1, item 2, and item 4. just do that here. And then I'm going to change this slightly. These longer lines. I'm going to shorten them. And then I'm gonna yeah, it did. It pasted it. It kind of did copy paste and it put it right on top. So I'm gonna use this as my pricing line. Yeah, I'm going to use this as my pricing line. And I'm going to add a $sign. And then I'm going to just do my total here too. And say total. And then I'm gonna copy this same button. I'm gonna say confirm order. That got shifted somehow. You can line it up to the pasteboard too. Well, the frame, it's called the frame. Using the alignment tools here at the top. You can also distribute spacing between objects. It's handy, I use that a lot. Okay, so then I'm going to call this a day as far as these 4 screens are concerned. And I guess I kind of like the happy face. So I'm going to change this component. I'm just going to copy it. You don't have to do that. I'm going to change my profile icon to a happy face. So I'm going to remove the fill, add a stroke. I'm just going to do the same thing I did here. change my fill to black and draw a happy line. Draw a happy line. Enter to exit. I want to adjust these endpoints. You can also turn on the grid overlay, and you can drop rules into this line. I'm going to make this line, I'm going to make it like round at the end. Oops. Adjust it. I'm going to just group this portion here. And this is my art, top nav B. And then I'm going to just I'm going to preserve that just as art for now. And I'm going to create a new instance. Top nav B instance. And then I'm going to show you how I would swap this. To top nav B. So that's how you would swap an instance. So a couple other things I should point out is the ability to make shapes from other shapes. So for example, I'm going to draw a couple circles. And considered Pathfinder and Illustrator, but it's also offered as a feature in Figma, is the ability to make non-destructive changes to shapes to create a new shape. So I can join these two circles, I can subtract one, intersect, and exclude. For example, if you needed a shape like that. Draw with a pencil. So this is a really useful program. Please check back. I may have some additional videos later on as part of this series, but I appreciate your tuning in. Please give me a like, subscribe to get my feed for future videos, and thank you for watching.